So after 7 long years of waiting, The Last of Us Part 2 has finally released on PlayStation, and it's time to review the game after I finished the story on this here YouTube channel. I have completed the game, and now it is time to show my final impressions and my review of the game, and ultimately give it a score out of 10. So, what's the gameplay like of The Last of Us 2? Well, it's very similar to The Last of Us 1. Naturally, they followed their same core thing, but there are new enemy types. On top of new enemy types, there are massive amounts of attention to detail in this game, which I will go into detail later. There are new weapons, new type upgrade lines, new characters to meet, and new collectibles to have, and so much more. And I'm going to explain and tell you what I feel about this game, and ultimately give it a score out of 10. So first off, you've got the enemies. You've got new types of enemies. You've got enemies called the Scars, or Seraphites. You've got the Wolves, the WLF, which you are hunting down as Ellie once again, as she tries to get justice for something that happens in the story, which we will go into detail near the end of the video. Now, I personally liked most of the enemies. Like, for instance, if you're getting attacked by like 5 or 6 enemies, and you kill one of them, you'll hear the rest of them shout. They'll be like, "Derek, no! Alan, oh my god, they got her!" or something like that, and it's amazing to hear. And then you'll hear them, "Oh, she's out of ammo!" or "Quick, flank her!" or something like that, and the enemy callouts are just amazing. And on top of that, you've got things like a new crafting system, which is overall simplistic. I mean, all you've got to do is pick up scrap and parts from around the world as you explore, and then go to a nearby workbench, or, well, the next workbench you find, and you can upgrade it. If you've got enough, it'll upgrade your gun, and it'll give you some simple stats like stability, damage on some weapons, reload speed, and other things like that. Now, compared to the crafting system in The Last of Us 1, where you had to get like a special toolbox, or a special like workbench set to be able to get your weapons up to a higher level each time, The Last of Us Part 2 has removed that, and I feel like it's done the game so much good, because ultimately now I just got to gather parts. I don't have to 100% explore the game if I don't wish to. I did explore my best for this review. I have finished the game on the story, and I have replayed it on higher difficulties just to see how the AI stacks up, and the AI can be a bit brutal. They do tend to flank more often. They do a lot of damage, so it feels very sort of a bit more realistic than you would expect. And there is even this amazing feature where an enemy with a bow and arrow will shoot you in the arm, and you'll have the arrow get stuck, and you have to go run to cover and yank it out, like hold R1 to pull this arrow out of your shoulder or your leg or wherever it goes, or is she going to start slowly losing health through a bleeding effect, so to speak. And that's amazing. Like, and then on top of that, as you pull out the arrow, you can see the blood pools on your clothes. Or later a character that you play as in the game later, Abby, if you get hit by fire, because she wears like a sleeveless shirt, if she gets hit in the arm by fire or something, it sets her arm on fire. When it goes off, her arm flares up, it goes bright red to show that it's burnt, and it's amazing. Like, the blood drips so beautifully. If you slide down a dirt path, or slide down something, or go into water, it shows on your outfits. Like, if you slide down a path, all the back of your character's legs are covered in dirt and muck, and you can see it drip off. Like, blood will pool in little ponds of water. God rays in this game look beautiful. It's just got some amazing attention to detail, and I really care for attention to detail in a video game. It's one of the most important things you can have if you're trying to tell a well thought out story, or if you're trying to build a very good world. Now, as you can see here, this is some gameplay of the crafting, which I personally really enjoyed. Look, I mean, as you can see, simplistic. You just need to get the scrap parts, you choose your gun, and there's some amazing animations for it as well when you upgrade. Now, on top of that, there is also collectibles. For Ellie, there is hero cards, which are quite cool, quite finicky. You know, you can pick them up, look at them. I wasn't overly interested in looking at them. I looked at a few for the purpose of the review, but ultimately I didn't collect every single collectible. There are also antique coins from different states of America for the character Abby, who we will get into later. Now, during Ellie's storyline, you will encounter quite a few. You'll encounter new types of infected called I think they're called lurkers or sneakers, something like that, and it's quite funny how they work actually, because what they'll do is they'll take cover and they'll peer at you and look at you, but if you look at them, they'll hide and run away, and they'll try and sneak up on you and attack you like that, and that's really cool, really interesting AI. Like even later, when in a particular boss fight in the game later on, there's one of them that runs around the room and tries to attack you, while this giant sort of monster smashes through this wall. But for spoiler reasons, I won't tell you what it is or where it is in the story. And that is pretty much it for the gameplay. On the attention to detail side, I mean, you've got crafting, as you can see here, house-made crafting. Ellie can craft all certain things. At the moment in this gameplay, she can only craft a medkit and a Molotov cocktail, but it will go to a point where you can increase weapons, you can make explosive arrows for your bow and arrow, normal arrows for your bow and arrow. The character Abby, although she crafts a lot slower, can create shivs, because Ellie has a switchblade. As most people who have played the first game will remember, she has a little switchblade she can use to stealth kill enemies, or stealth kill clickers, whereas Abby needs to craft a shiv to be able to kill like an enemy with this shiv, or a clicker with the shiv, because she doesn't have the ability. On top of that, the facial animations are incredible. Like, if you sneak up on an enemy and you attack, you just rotate the camera and look at Ellie's face. You can see she's putting so much effort into trying to go put this knife through this clicker's throat, or this enemy's throat. And it's the same with Abby. Abby just looks like she's trying to snap an enemy's neck, to the point where it looks like she generally enjoys doing what she does in certain places.
It's nice to have a place we call home, right?
On top of that, there is even a very well detailed map. Well, in this particular section, it goes open world, a little bit open world, and you can search all these new areas, which is really fun and quite interesting to search all these areas, including like a bank and things like that. It is quite interesting. There are lots of different notes in the games, which can sometimes give you combination to a safe, and this safe you'll open and you'll get loads of goodies in it. And overall, I think the gameplay is just quite stellar over here, quite phenomenal. It's different enough to set it apart from Last of Us 1, apart from the core third-person shooter mechanic. But overall, there's enough new things in the gameplay here to keep me happy. Okay, so for everybody worried about spoilers out there, now this would be the time to either skip to the end of the video to see the score, or stop watching, because we were about to talk about the characters, and in doing so we'll probably spoil certain aspects of the story. So there are a few characters in this game, but the two mainly need to be focused on really are the two playable characters, which is Ellie and Abby. Ellie, as everybody knows, is the character from The Last of Us 1 who is immune, that Joel travels across almost the entire country of the USA to, get to the Fireflies to help create a cure with her immunity. Now, the other playable character is Abby, who, after a certain event in the story, most players despise, and most players do not want to really play as this character after this certain point in the game, and I can understand why. And this character Abby will eventually sort of be forced to play as, and you don't want to for a good about 10 plus hours of playing as this Abby, and a lot of people don't like her. I didn't at first, purely not because of the story. I just didn't like her as a character. She was just very rash, very sort of prone to sort of, just go hit you, hit you straight away, just get this done, get out of the way. Overall, as the game tries to force sympathy on you for what happens in the story, I ended up kind of liking Abby as a character. Now, what she did is still bad and still wrong in the story, and she does deserve to be punished for it. But as you watch what happens, she certainly suffers a lot of punishment, and she tries to save these two kids to sort of help with the guilt of what she has done in the story.
Okay, I'll kill them.
And which is kind of, you know, it's kind of forced sympathy. But ultimately, I just kind of liked. I didn't feel sorry for the character. I just kind of enjoyed the character. It was quite fun. Her fighting style is more brawler based, so she's more melee. To be fair, against infected, you tend to see melee. I tended to use melee more often than I would try and shoot an infected. Whereas she gets different types of weapons. She gets weapons ranging from a crossbow, which is incredible against clickers, as well as a flamethrower, a double-barreled shotgun, and lots more different weapons compared to Ellie. And as I've already mentioned prior into this review, she has different crafting abilities. She can craft. She has different supplement upgrades as well. As well as her crafting, she can craft shivs. I think pipe bombs. Incendiary shells for her double-barreled shotgun, which are incredible against infected. A supplement upgrades, there is one based around brawling, like fighting, one based around weaponry, normal survival and crafting, and ultimately her gameplay is quite fun. She has some brutal execution moves where she'll smash somebody's head against the concrete, or just crack somebody's head, or throw them onto the floor and just stomp on their head, or cave somebody's head in with a golf club. And ultimately, I did enjoy playing as Abby after a long time. It did take me a long time. It was near the end of her sort of story where I sort of started to enjoy playing as her, and ultimately I feel like her character development could have been done a lot better, and could have been a lot more sort of guided, really, or they could have rearranged the story or something like that, because what she does in the game is really unforgivable. I mean, maybe if they'd have added the full sympathy first, then she does the deed, then, you know, maybe people would have probably sympathised with her a bit more. But from the shock value, she's definitely got 10 out of 10 for shock value. Now, the problem with the story is with Ellie is it's the same with both Ellie and Abby. There's sort of like a justice, like Ellie's going after Abby for what she would call justice at one point in the game, which you would really call vengeance or revenge, as she goes after Abby. Now, for she goes after Abby, she goes all the way to Seattle. She takes on new types of infected, hundreds of infected. These enemies called the WLF, enemies called the Scars, which whistle through the woods, which are quite very interesting. But these Scars and these wolves are at war with each other, so sometimes you might get caught in the crossfire between both of them. And that's all I've got to say about the story overall. What the controversy is what we've got to talk about next, and this is where most people will want to sort of duck out, definitely. If you've already got through with some loose spoilers here, this is about to blow the game open if you haven't already heard of it. Now, the controversy is that the game is currently being review bombed, or well, it was being review bombed, and now it's got to a point where Metacritic has blocked people from doing negative reviews, because they're review bombing it so much. But basically, this Abby kills Joel in the first 2 hours of the game. She caves Joel's head in with a golf club. And this leaves players obviously hating the character Abby and wanting to kill the character Abby, for them to be forced to play her for 10 hours after when she hit the halfway point of the game. And that upsets a lot of players. I can understand why it upsets a lot of players, and I understand why people are review bombing it. But as I'm giving a review, I kind of feel like I can't really judge this I can't really let this controversy guide my own score. I have to give this game a score based on what I feel about the game and how I feel. And yes, I am upset about what happened with Joel, but ultimately the game does try its damnedest to make you realise why it's happened, and it's quite obvious why it happened, and it tries to make you feel for the character Abby in a forced way, which is also bad.
Not gonna be as easy as
and after looking at so much, and following the story and looking at so many other people's comments and reviews, and looking at the Metacritic scores, I have decided this time round I will ultimately let this affect the score, because me as a player, I am disappointed with the way the story has gone, but that does not take away from the rest of this game. Is pretty interesting, it's pretty fun to play, and just because it's got a poor story doesn't mean the rest of the game is utter trash, because it's purely not. I've already said the attention to detail is amazing, the characters are amazing. I mean, eventually I personally felt, I didn't feel sympathy for Abby, but I personally felt alright with Abby. Abby was a decent character near the end. I felt like she had attempted to redeem herself in a way, and maybe that's what the writers were trying to go for. I don't know, I'm not a writer, I didn't write the game. They just probably wanted Abby to be hated, they probably didn't. Now, I've said some good, I've said some bad, and it's time to give the game a final score based on all of this. So my final score for The Last of Us Part 2, after 7 years of waiting, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Now, I do have a reason for it not being higher, despite a lot of the praise I've just given the game. It is ultimately because of the story. The story does let it down. Ultimately, there is not many reasons why these characters should act the way they do. There didn't really need to be a Last of Us Part 2. It was Naughty Dog just felt like they wanted to do, which is more than fine. That's okay, but ultimately the story did let it down for me. I understand why a lot of people are mad, and I do feel some of that same anger with how they've treated certain characters in the game. And ultimately, the rest of the score comes from the gameplay, the attention to detail, the weapons, and certain high moments in the story, like certain good action sequences, or certain tense sequences, like final boss fights or certain boss fights and stuff like that. So, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next review.